The moment Callum Voss felt the rush of energy around him, he knew something had gone wrong. 1 second, he was in the transport bay of the Galactic Embassy, waiting for a routine teleportation jump to the human colony on Epsilon Prime. The next, he was standing in a vast, dimly lit chamber filled with shimmering blue silk, towering golden pillars, and strange glowing symbols carved into the walls. Something was off. Before he could react, a sharp gasp cut through the silence. Callum turned, his eyes widening as he saw her, a tall, regal-looking woman standing at the far end of the chamber. She had smooth, violet-hued skin, shimmering in the soft golden light of the room, and her piercing silver eyes locked onto him with a mix of shock and anger. Her long, midnight black hair cascaded over her shoulders, partially covering the intricate silver markings that ran down her arms, a sign of royalty among the Valorian people. And from the way she was dressed, an elegant silk robe, embroidered with shimmering silver threads, Callum quickly realized this was no ordinary woman. This was Princess Silara, the heir to the mighty Valorian Empire, and he had just teleported into her private chambers. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Then, Silara's eyes flared with fury. With a flick of her wrist, a hidden blade snapped into her hand, its sharp edge glowing faintly with an energy field. "You dare," she hissed, her voice filled with icy authority. Callum lifted his hands, taking a cautious step backward. Wait. This is a mistake. I didn't mean to be here." The princess took a slow step forward, her posture rigid and controlled, like a predator assessing its prey. "A human. In my chambers," she said coldly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I do now," Callum muttered under his breath. This was bad. Very bad. A low chime echoed through the room. A warning alarm. Guards were coming. Silara's jaw clenched, her grip tightening on the blade. "If they find you here, they will kill you." Callum swallowed hard. "Then maybe we should make sure they don't find me here." For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Curiosity. Amusement. He wasn't sure. But then, to his surprise, she hesitated. The door to the chamber slammed open, and Callum had exactly 1 second to react. Without thinking, he did the only thing that made sense. He grabbed the nearest silk curtain, yanked it down, and wrapped himself inside it, vanishing from sight just as 2 Valorian guards stormed inside, their weapons drawn. Silara turned to them, her expression unreadable. "Princess," one of the guards bowed. "We detected an anomaly. Is everything all right?" There was a long pause. Then, to Callum's utter disbelief, Silara smirked. "The only anomaly here," she said smoothly, "is that you are interrupting my evening." Callum held his breath, pressed against the cold stone wall, hidden beneath the heavy silk curtain. His heart pounded as he listened to the conversation happening just a few feet away. The Valorian guards stood tall, their armor reflecting the dim golden light of the chamber. Their sharp, reptilian eyes scanned the room, their hands gripping long, bladed energy staffs. These were elite warriors, trained to eliminate any threat without hesitation. "We detected a teleportation anomaly, Your Highness," one of the guards said firmly. "A foreign presence in your chambers." Silara crossed her arms, her silver eyes narrowing slightly. "And what do you see now?" she asked coolly. The guards exchanged a look, then scanned the room once more. The chamber was vast, decorated with intricate golden carvings, shimmering blue silk curtains, and ancient Valorian artifacts, but there was no sign of an intruder. The lead guard hesitated. "Nothing, Princess, but our scanners. Perhaps your scanners are malfunctioning." Silara interrupted. Her voice was calm, but Callum noticed a slight edge in it. The guards straightened, clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion that their technology might be flawed. One of them shifted, his eyes narrowing. "Permission to do a full security sweep, Princess." Callum's fingers curled into fists. If they searched the room, he was dead. Silara tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, to his complete shock, she let out a soft, amused laugh. A full sweep. Are you implying that an intruder managed to enter the heart of the royal palace, bypassing all security, and is now hiding in my chambers without me knowing? She stepped forward, her long robe flowing behind her like liquid silver. Do you think I am so weak that I would not sense an enemy in my own presence? The guards instantly straightened, their expressions shifting from suspicion to unease. Of course not, Princess. We meant no disrespect. Silara smirked. Then leave. I will not tolerate further disturbances tonight. The guards hesitated only a moment longer before bowing. As you command. With that, they turned and marched out of the chamber, the heavy doors sliding shut behind them. Silence filled the room. Callum didn't dare move. Then, after a few tense seconds, Silara let out a slow breath and turned toward his hiding place. You can come out now, human, she said, her tone laced with mild amusement. Callum hesitated before cautiously pulling the silk curtain aside. His muscles were tense, his mind racing. She had just saved him. But why? He met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw something unexpected in her expression. Curiosity. Why did you help me? He asked carefully. Silara raised an eyebrow. I haven't decided if I helped you, she replied smoothly. Perhaps I'm just interested in seeing what you'll do next. Callum exhaled slowly. This was far from over. Callum stood awkwardly in the grand chamber, facing Princess Silara, who had just saved his life. For now, his instincts told him he should be running, finding a way out of this alien palace, but something about her gaze held him still. She leaned against a golden pillar, her silver eyes studying him with mild amusement. You're not like the other humans I've encountered, she said. Most of them don't break into my chambers. Callum rubbed the back of his neck. For the last time, I didn't mean to be here. Your teleportation grid must have pulled me in. Silara smirked. Convenient excuse. Callum sighed. This wasn't going well. Look, I just need to get out of here before your guards change their minds. Silara's expression shifted slightly, her amusement fading into something more calculating. You think it's that simple? Callum frowned. What do you mean? She stepped forward, circling him like a predator sizing up its prey. You appeared in my chambers, a place where no outsider has ever stepped foot and lived. My people saw the anomaly. Even if I let you walk out of here, the entire Valorian High Council will demand answers. Callum's stomach tightened. He hadn't thought about that. Even if he escaped this room, he was still trapped in the palace. Silara stopped in front of him, tilting her head slightly. There's only one way you leave this palace alive. Callum swallowed hard. And what's that? A slow smile spread across Silara's lips. You play along. He narrowed his eyes. Play along? With what? She lifted a hand, brushing a strand of midnight black hair over her shoulder. Valorian law states that any outsider found in the royal chambers is either a spy or a challenger for my hand. Callum blinked. Excuse me. If I declare you a spy, you die, Silara said smoothly. But if I claim you as a challenger, you will be granted temporary protection under ancient tradition. No one will be able to touch you, at least, not until the trials begin. Callum groaned. Trials? That doesn't sound better. Silara chuckled. Oh, it's not. The right of dominion is a sacred competition to prove one's worth as a royal consort. If you lose, you'll be executed for dishonoring the challenge. Callum's heart sank. So either I die now, or I die later. Silara gave him a teasing look. Not necessarily. If you impress the council, you might survive long enough to escape. Callum exhaled sharply. This was insane. Absolutely insane. But what choice did he have? Fine, he muttered. I'll play along. But if I survive this, you owe me an explanation. Silara smirked. If you survive, I'll owe you more than that, human. The next few hours were a blur for Callum. After agreeing to play along, he was led by Xylara through the grand corridors of the Valorian palace. The air was thick with tension, and every step he took felt like walking deeper into the unknown. Xylara, still walking with her graceful and confident stride, barely looked back at him. The palace guards glared at him as he passed, their eyes filled with suspicion. Callum couldn't help but feel like everyone knew something he didn't, and that something could get him killed. Finally, they stopped at an imposing set of doors, guarded by 2 elite soldiers. The doors were made of a strange metallic substance that shimmered as though alive. Xylara turned to him. "These are the council chambers. The council will decide what happens to you from here. I cannot change their minds if they demand your life." Callum nodded, his stomach in knots. He couldn't afford to fail. Xylara's voice softened for a moment. "If it helps, I don't think they'll kill you immediately. Valorians respect strength. Prove that you have something worth respecting, and they might spare you. You may even win their favor." Callum forced a smile. "I'll give it my best shot." Xylara looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she gestured for him to enter. The doors slowly opened, revealing a grand hall filled with Valorian leaders and nobles, their sharp eyes watching him carefully. The room was huge, with a long oval table at the center, and dark blue lights shining from the walls. At the far end of the hall, a massive throne sat empty, awaiting the princess's presence. Callum felt a surge of nervousness, but forced himself to walk forward with his head held high. Xylara took her place at the head of the table, her eyes scanning the room. "We convene today to address an unexpected development," Xylara announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs in the room. "A human has entered my private chambers, through no fault of his own. It is time to decide if he lives or dies." Callum's breath caught in his throat. This was it. One of the older council members, his wrinkled face filled with disdain, stood and spoke first. "A human. You ask us to entertain the idea that we spare this outsider. The very thought is an insult to our customs." Another council member, younger and with a fiercer expression, spoke next. "But he's not like the others, is he? His appearance here was no accident, and he has already shown surprising resilience." Xylara raised her hand, silencing the room. "Enough. We will do this the old way. The right of dominion will decide his fate." Callum swallowed hard. "And what exactly is this right?" The younger council member, noticing his confusion, sneered. "The right is a trial of strength, both physical and mental. Only those who can pass all trials are granted the title of consort. Fail, and death follows swiftly." Callum's heart hammered. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting for his life. Xylara looked at him one last time, her eyes filled with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "You wanted to play along, human. Now, prove you can survive." Callum straightened. There was no going back. If he was going to get out of this alive, he'd have to win. Callum stood in the center of the grand hall, surrounded by the Valorian council and their watching eyes. His hands were sweaty, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never imagined his first meeting with an alien princess would be like this, facing a deadly trial in front of an entire council. Xylara sat at the head of the table, her sharp eyes fixed on him. She had a calm, almost amused expression, as though she was curious to see how far the human would go. The older council members glared down at him with disdain, while others observed him with quiet interest. A large circle of light suddenly appeared on the floor before him, casting an eerie glow around him. A Valorian servant stepped forward, holding a small metallic object. He placed it in the center of the glowing circle, and Callum's eyes widened as it began to pulse with energy. "This is the trial of endurance," Xylara announced, her voice echoing through the room. "You must remain within this circle, enduring the heat, the cold, and the pressure that will be applied. If you leave, or if you fail to withstand the trial, you die." Callum nodded, his mind racing. He had no idea what kind of test this was, but he had to face it. There was no backing out now. He couldn't even escape if he wanted to. The servant stepped back, and the circle's energy surged. Immediately, Callum felt a wave of heat hit him. It was like standing in the middle of a burning desert, the heat searing through his clothes and making it hard to breathe. Focus. Stay still. It's just heat. You've faced worse in your own world, Callum whispered to himself, trying to block out the pain. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the discomfort. He had to hold on. Seconds turned to minutes, and the heat only grew more intense. His skin felt like it was melting, but he refused to give in. He couldn't give up. But then, without warning, the temperature plummeted. The heat vanished, replaced by cold so intense it felt like ice was running through his veins. His breath came out in visible clouds, and his fingers began to numb. The chill cut through him, freezing his bones. Callum staggered slightly but quickly caught himself. He could feel his body shaking, his muscles aching. This was nothing like the cold he had experienced back home. This felt like a prison of ice, trying to lock him in place. Still, he didn't move. The council members watched, their eyes narrowing as they observed the human's resistance. Silara leaned forward slightly, a flicker of something like respect in her gaze. But she didn't speak. As Callum fought to stay focused, the trial intensified. The pressure around him started to build, like an invisible weight pressing down on his chest, making every breath harder to take. His vision blurred, and his legs began to tremble from the strain. Was he going to make it? He wasn't sure how much longer he could last. And then, just when he thought he couldn't take any more, the energy around him suddenly shifted, pulling back. The lights dimmed, and the pressure vanished. The circle's energy released, leaving Callum standing in the center, gasping for air. He had done it. He had survived. Silara's voice broke the silence. Impressive. For a human. The council members were silent, but Callum could feel their judgment waning on him. He had passed the first trial. But this was only the beginning. Callum's heart was still racing from the trial of endurance when the second trial was announced. His body ached, but there was no time to rest. The council members, their expressions cold and calculating, watched him closely as they prepared for the next challenge. Silara stood and waved a hand toward the far wall. A large holographic screen flickered to life, displaying a complex pattern of symbols and lines that twisted and turned like a maze. Callum could feel the weight of their eyes on him. The room was silent, expectant. "This is the trial of strategy," Silara declared, her voice as calm and unwavering as ever. "It is not about strength. It is about the mind. You will face a series of puzzles designed to challenge your intellect. If you fail, you will not survive to see another trial." Callum blinked, trying to understand. Puzzles. This wasn't what he was prepared for. He was a soldier, not a strategist. But he couldn't back down. If he was going to survive, he had to figure this out. The first puzzle appeared on the screen, a maze of numbers that moved and shifted rapidly, the lines crossing over each other in a chaotic dance. Callum squinted, trying to find some pattern in the madness. His head throbbed from the effort, but he forced himself to focus. He had no choice. Silara's eyes were sharp on him, her arms crossed as she watched in silence. Callum's mind raced, trying to make sense of the maze. Each number seemed random, but there was something familiar about the pattern. Then it clicked. The numbers weren't random. They were coordinates, a map. The lines that intersected with the numbers weren't just connecting them. They were drawing a path. He needed to find the correct route. With a deep breath, Callum began tracing the lines in his mind, mentally navigating the maze. He could feel the council members' eyes on him, their judgment pressing down with every second. But Callum didn't care. He had to finish this. The puzzle began to slow down as Callum moved through it with increasing confidence. The shifting numbers slowed, and the pattern began to clear. He pushed forward, calculating each step with precision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last number aligned, and the maze opened up. He had solved it. A soft murmur spread through the room as the holographic screen changed, presenting a new puzzle. This time, it was a series of geometric shapes that moved, rotated, and shifted on the screen. Callum could feel his mind beginning to tire, but he couldn't let that stop him. He had to finish this. He took a deep breath, focusing on the shapes. This was a test of logic and spatial awareness. He recognized the shapes were part of a complex structure, one that needed to be completed in order. But which one came first? Which angle needed to be aligned? His mind raced, but slowly, methodically, he began fitting the shapes together. He had solved the first puzzle. He could solve this one too. With each move, the shapes clicked into place, and at last, the final piece locked into position. The shapes dissolved, and the room fell silent once again. Callum exhaled, exhausted but relieved. He had done it. Silara stood, her eyes narrowing slightly in approval. You have done what most Valorians could not. The council members were silent, exchanging glances. Callum's heart pounded in his chest. Had he earned their respect, or had he just delayed the inevitable? The silence in the chamber was heavy, almost suffocating. Callum had barely caught his breath from the trial of strategy when Silara rose from her seat, her gaze locking onto him. The tension in the room seemed to increase with each passing second. The final trial, Silara announced, her voice clear and commanding. This trial will test your honor and your strength. You will face me in a duel, human. Callum's heart skipped a beat. A duel? He had survived the tests of endurance and intellect, but facing a trained alien warrior like Silara was something else entirely. His mind raced, trying to calculate his chances. He had no real weapon, no armor, just himself. The council members leaned forward, intrigued by the challenge. Callum could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to either fail or succeed. Silara, however, appeared calm, her posture poised and confident. Don't worry, human, I won't kill you. Yet, she said with a sly smile. But if you want to survive this trial, you will need to do more than just fight. You will need to show me respect and resourcefulness, or you will be crushed. Callum took a deep breath. His first instinct was to run. This was a fight he could not win. But running wasn't an option. He had come too far. If he was going to survive, he would have to rely on his wits, not brute strength. Silara raised her hand, and immediately, a glowing blade appeared in her palm. It hummed with a low energy, a weapon forged for combat, designed to cut through metal like paper. Callum's eyes widened as he realized just how deadly this duel could be. Silara's eyes flicked toward him, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. What's wrong, human? Scared. Callum straightened, wiping the sweat from his brow. He couldn't let her see his fear. Not at all. The two faced off in the center of the room, the council watching silently. Silara's glowing blade was a blur of motion as she swung it toward him. Callum ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike. He couldn't fight her with strength, but maybe he could outsmart her. He quickly glanced around the room, searching for anything that could give him an advantage. The only thing nearby was a large ceremonial statue, an ancient relic of the Valorian Empire. It stood on a pedestal, just behind Silara, if he could use it as a distraction. As Silara moved to strike again, Callum dove to the side, rolling under her blade. He grabbed a heavy stone pedestal that was part of the statue and hurled it toward her. The impact caught her off guard, knocking her off balance for just a moment. That moment was enough. Callum rushed forward, using the momentum to grab her wrist, locking her in a brief but firm grip. It wasn't much, but it was enough to stop her from landing the killing blow. The room fell silent as the council members exchanged looks of surprise. Silara's silver eyes met Callum's with a mixture of respect and annoyance. You have more courage than I thought, human, Silara said, her voice low but impressed. Callum held her gaze, breathing heavily. I didn't come here to die. For a long moment, the two stood in silence, locked in an intense stare. Then, Solara slowly lowered her blade, signaling the end of the duel. "Well done," she said, her tone no longer mocking, but acknowledging his strength. "You've earned my respect. The council will honor your victory." The council members looked at each other, clearly stunned by what had just happened. For the first time, Callum saw a flicker of admiration in their eyes. He had done it. He had survived all 3 trials. But there was no time to celebrate yet. The real challenge was just beginning. The chamber was still, the tension thick in the air as the Valorian Council deliberated. Callum stood before them, his body aching from the duel and the intense trials he had already survived. He had done what no human had done before. He had passed all 3 tests: the trial of endurance, the trial of strategy, and the duel of honor. But despite his victory, the real battle was far from over. Solara, who had been silent throughout the final trial, now stood beside him, her presence imposing. The council's members sat at the long, oval table, their gazes sharp and unyielding. Callum could feel the weight of their judgment on his shoulders. They had never seen a human do what he had done. But that didn't mean they were ready to accept him. One of the council members, a tall, middle-aged Valorian with sharp features, leaned forward. "A human has completed the rite of dominion. This is unheard of." His voice was harsh, laced with disbelief. "And yet, here we are, discussing the fate of a mere outsider." Another member, younger and with a more open expression, spoke up. "He has earned the right to live, at the very least. The council must acknowledge that his strength and intellect are not to be ignored." Solara's silver eyes flicked between the two, her expression unreadable. "He has not only survived, he has proven himself worthy. He has done what most of my people would not or could not do." The older council member narrowed his eyes. "You speak as though you are already willing to give him favor, Princess, but you know the law. No outsider, no human, is allowed to stand at the side of the royal family. Not unless they are worthy in more than just their strength." Solara did not flinch. "I never said he would stand at my side, but he has earned my respect." The room fell silent, and Callum's heart pounded in his chest. The council had already shown him no mercy. He had earned his survival. But would that be enough? Finally, Solara raised her hand, signaling for calm. "We do not have to follow the old ways if they do not serve us. Perhaps it is time to change the way we think. Perhaps humans and Valorians can learn from each other." Callum's pulse quickened. This was it. "I agree with the princess," another council member said, his voice strong. "We cannot ignore what we have seen today. Callum Voss, though a human, has proven that he is more than just an outsider. He has shown courage, intelligence, and strength. I say we grant him the title of honored guest, a title not given lightly." The room was still for a long moment. The council members exchanged tense glances, and Callum held his breath. Would they honor Solara's decision, or would they deny it out of pride? Finally, the older member who had spoken earlier sighed, shaking his head. "I still think this is a mistake," he muttered, but the others remained quiet. After a long pause, Solara stood tall, her voice clear. "The council has spoken. Callum Voss, you are granted the title of honored guest," she announced. "Your life is spared. And from this day forward, you will be treated with the respect you have earned." Callum felt his knees go weak with relief. He had survived. The impossible had been accomplished. But he knew that his journey was far from over. Solara turned to him with a glint of something, curiosity, maybe even admiration, in her silver eyes. "You've passed the trials, Callum Voss. But the real test has just begun. The future of both our people will depend on what happens next." Callum looked at her, his heart still racing, but now with a sense of purpose. He had earned his survival, but now he would have to fight for something more. The room was still, the weight of Solara's words hanging in the air. Callum stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by the Valorian Council and their piercing gazes. He had survived the rite of dominion. He had proven himself in ways no human had before. Yet despite his victory, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were only beginning. Silara turned to him, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the low light of the council chamber. "You've earned the respect of the council, Callum Boss. But that does not mean your place here is secure. The Valorian Empire is built on tradition, and no matter how impressive you are, your presence will always be seen as a threat to the status quo." Callum felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected resistance, but hearing it from Silara herself made it feel all the more real. Still, he wasn't ready to back down. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to leave now. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice steady but with a tinge of uncertainty. Silara studied him carefully. "It means that there are those in the council who will never accept you. Your victory in the trials may have earned you the title of honored guest, but there are those who will see your presence here as a challenge to their power. The road ahead won't be easy." Callum swallowed hard, but he kept his gaze firm. "I didn't come here to make things easy. I came here to survive, and to make sure I don't get sent back to Earth in pieces." Silara's lips curled into a small, almost amused smile. "I see. And you think surviving here will be any easier?" Callum didn't answer right away. He could feel the weight of the council's eyes on him, the silent judgment still hanging in the air. The Valorian people were proud, powerful, and deeply rooted in their traditions. And now, he was standing at the center of it all. But what did that mean for him? What role would he play in their world? Before he could speak, a voice rang out from across the room. "Enough, Princess. We have heard your words, but this human is a liability. The Valorian Empire cannot be ruled by those who are not our own." Callum turned toward the voice. It came from one of the council members, a tall, broad-shouldered Valorian, with dark green scales covering his face. His voice was deep, his tone full of disdain. "You forget your place, Varen." Silara's voice was sharp, her eyes flashing with a hint of anger. "This human has proven himself worthy. He has completed the rite of dominion, something that no outsider has done in centuries." The council member, Varen, scoffed. "It does not matter. He is a human, and no human will ever sit at the table of the Valorian Empire." Callum felt the tension rise in the room, thick as smoke. He didn't need to be a strategist to know that this was far from over. He had earned his survival, but he hadn't won their hearts. The next steps would be crucial, if he could even take them. Silara's voice broke through the tension. "Perhaps the Empire needs to change, Varen. Perhaps it is time to rethink what makes a ruler worthy." Varen's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. The room was silent, but Callum could feel the storm brewing beneath the surface. Silara turned back to Callum, her eyes softening ever so slightly. "You've done well, human, but your future here is uncertain. The Empire is divided, and it is not a place for those who can't withstand its trials." Callum took a deep breath. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll fight for my place." Silara looked at him, a mixture of admiration and something else flickering in her eyes. "So be it. But know this, what you're asking for is dangerous. It will change everything." Callum nodded. He was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. The days after the council's verdict were filled with uncertainty. Callum had earned the title of honored guest, but it was clear that his presence in the Valorian Empire was far from accepted. Every corridor, every meeting, every glance from the Valorian nobles reminded him that his survival was just the beginning of a much deeper struggle. Despite the tension, Callum couldn't shake the feeling that he had made the right choice. He had proven himself in the rite of dominion, but now he had to navigate a world where humans were viewed as nothing more than outsiders. Even though he had earned respect in the eyes of Princess Silara, he was still seen as a threat by many. The palace felt different now. The halls were colder, the air heavier with the weight of his survival. Yet there was something else too, a flicker of opportunity. Silara had given him the chance to stay, to prove his worth, but it wasn't going to be easy. Callum stood at the balcony of his chamber, looking out over the vast city of the Valorian capital. The sky above was dark and stormy, the clouds swirling in a chaotic dance. Below, the city was alive, a mixture of ancient stone structures and towering modern spires. The contrast was striking, an empire built on both tradition and progress. He turned away from the view as the door to his chamber slid open. Silara entered, her presence commanding. She had been quiet for days, her thoughts no doubt consumed by the growing division within her empire. Callum had learned that she wasn't just the princess. She was a leader torn between upholding the old ways and pushing for a new future. "You're still here, human," she said, her voice soft, but with a hint of amusement. Callum gave her a small smile. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." Silara's silver eyes glinted as she stepped closer. "You've made a dangerous choice. The council has made their position clear, and there are others who will challenge your presence." "I faced challenges before," Callum replied, his tone steady. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Silara studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then she nodded. "You're not like other humans. You've proven that. But you still have much to learn about the politics of this empire." Callum crossed his arms, feeling a sense of determination rise within him. "I didn't come here for politics. I came here to survive. And now, I'm here to make sure my survival means something." Silara's eyes softened ever so slightly. "I see. You think your survival means something, but it's more than that. If you stay, it will mean much more than just your life. It will mean a shift in the very fabric of this empire." Callum looked at her, understanding dawning. "You mean a shift in the way things are done. The old traditions, they're breaking." Silara nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes, and it won't be easy. There are those who will resist. But if you truly wish to be part of this empire, you will need to forge your own path, not as a human, but as someone who can change the course of the future." Callum felt a surge of energy. This was what he had been waiting for, a chance to make a difference. He had fought for his survival, but now he had the chance to fight for something much bigger. "I'm ready," he said firmly. "I'll help you change this empire." Silara looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, she smiled. A rare, genuine smile. "Then let's begin, Callum Voss. Let's see what you can really do." And just like that, Callum knew. His journey had only just begun. He had earned his survival, but now he would fight to build a future, one where humans and Valorians could stand side by side. The path ahead would be difficult, dangerous, and filled with challenges. But Callum was no stranger to hardship. He was ready for whatever came next. The end, or just the beginning?